Hello and welcome. I'm Tanya Charlton. Today we're going to talk about how to get started with teaching Christian Studies 1 through 3. If this is your first time with us, go ahead and subscribe to the channel to make sure you get updates when we post new curriculum guides. And if you find this video helpful, give us a thumbs up and let us know what you think. Now, without further ado, let's jump in. Christian Studies requires a little more explanation of our philosophy here at Memoria Press than other subjects, so I'm going to take a minute to make a couple of important points. First, our curriculum is ecumenical. Our intention is that our Christian Studies courses will work for anyone, regardless of faith. We have deliberately left out the teaching of doctrine because we believe that it's the role of your family and your church, and we don't want to insert ourselves into the middle of that. Second, we prefer the King James Version of the Bible for our grammar school students. We feel that elevated language lifts students up, preparing them to read Shakespeare and Homer, Virgil and Dante. The vivid imagery in the KJV, along with the poetic prose, provides a beauty that you don't get with more modern translations of the Bible. However, we do put the scripture references for each lesson in the study guide. So if you want to use a different version of an adult Bible, you can easily make that switch. Keeping in mind those two important distinctions, let's talk about what you'll need in order to teach this course. The Golden Children's Bible is our text. It's the New King James, so it isn't a retelling of the Bible. It's the actual scripture, but it's condensed so students get the experience of reading scripture without being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of an adult Bible. This condensed scripture allows us to get through the entire canon of Bible stories within 3 or 4 years. I need to point out another important point about the Golden Children's Bible. One of the things we like about it, in addition to its use of real scripture rather than a retelling, is the detailed illustrations. But for some reason, Jesus is depicted as blonde. We assume that this is to make him stand out, rather in the vein of medieval art that always puts a halo around his head. But we really don't know. Rather than getting hung up on this, we just point out to our students that Jesus was Middle Eastern and Jewish, so he probably was not blonde. This information about Jesus actually becomes a good lesson because we have found that students haven't really thought about Jesus' ancestry. And our students have been known to color Jesus' hair in their Golden Children's Bibles to make him look more realistic. So that could be your solution also. In addition to the Golden Children's Bible, you will need a student guide and a teacher manual. The teacher manual has all the answers to the student guide layered on for you and unit tests and test keys. Each lesson also includes background information for the teacher, extra activities, and a list of the questions to mark for review and mastery. In addition to these essential books, you also have the option of purchasing several sets of flashcards, memory verse flashcards, and Old and New Testament flashcards. I'll tell you how these fit into the program as we go along here. We also have a set of Christian Studies maps in 2 sizes that will help put the locations of the Bible stories into context for your students. And finally, you may want to get the Memoria Press lesson plans. Each lesson should take approximately an hour and a half each week. We have lesson plans for Christian Studies 1 that you can complete over the course of 1 year or 2 years. Christian Studies 2 and 3 plans are only available at a 1-year pacing. So you will complete your study of the Bible over the course of the grammar school years, either in 3 years or 4, depending on your pacing. Christian Studies 1 begins with Genesis and takes you through the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, ending with the death of Moses and the Israelites poised to enter Canaan. Christian Studies 2 picks up there and takes us through the rest of the Old Testament. Christian Studies 3 covers the New Testament, with the majority of the year focused on the Gospels and a few lessons at the end that cover the early church. Once you have all your supplies, the first thing you will need to do is prepare yourself. Read all the teaching guidelines in the teacher manual as well as the lesson plans. And if at all possible, always read the text you will be teaching each week ahead of time. If you can get to it, if you've already read the material before you study it with your students, it will enhance your ability to teach it. But I know that life happens, and in this course, the reading will be familiar to you since it's the Bible, so you can study it alongside your students and be just fine. Now let's talk about what a typical lesson will look like. You will want to review at the beginning of each class. Your review should be two-faceted. First, you need to review all the material students have marked in the lessons within the current unit that they are studying. This will help prepare them for the upcoming unit test. Secondly, you need to review the drill questions cumulatively from the entire year. This can be a short game using the flashcards. How many cards can you answer in 30 seconds? It should be fun, but it should also be a way for you to see that your students are learning to mastery. Your review should only take the first 10 minutes of class and is a great warm-up to the new lesson. I'll explain the drill questions as we delve into the actual lesson. After this cumulative review, spend a couple of minutes talking about the lesson from last week so that students will easily be able to connect it to this week's lesson since we're reading through the Bible chronologically. You could have your student narrate last week's story to accomplish this. This study guide is divided into units, and each unit has 5 lessons. At the end of every 5 lessons, there will be a unit review and test. The first thing to do when starting a lesson is to read over the facts to know. The facts to know is a list of names, places, and other references that will help with reading, like reading notes. They will familiarize students with the characters and places they're getting ready to read about. This should only take a couple of minutes. After you've talked about the facts to know, read through the memory verse for the week. The verse will come from the reading, so just read through it for now and ask students to be looking for it as you read together. And now you're ready to read. Younger students may not be ready to read the Golden Children's Bible independently. It's more difficult reading than the literature selections. So if your student does better with this book being used as a read aloud, that's perfectly acceptable. And students will get more comfortable reading the Bible independently as they progress through their grammar school years. Remember, this course of study will last throughout the grammar school, so we expect to see better fluent reading of difficult texts as students grow. You can decide when you want your student to mark the questions that will be on the test. The questions to mark for review and mastery section of the teacher manual. Students can circle the numbers of the questions or they can highlight them, whatever your preference is. This is an important step because it shows students what's important as they study. So I'm a fan of marking the lesson at the beginning rather than the end. It's a way of modeling for the students how to discern the important things they're studying. After you've completed the reading, it's time to answer the comprehension questions. For young students, this should be a joint project, with you as the teacher asking the students for an oral answer to each question. You put the answer on the board, and the students copy it into their study guides. We prefer full sentence answers, but you can make that decision for your students. Also, you may find that you don't have time to write answers to every question, and that's okay. Just make sure you write answers to the questions that are on the test, so students have their answers to study. And always talk about every question, even if you don't put a written answer in your study guide. These questions are meant to generate discussion of the reading, so they are an important tool for you. The answers we've put in the teacher manual are very detailed. We don't expect the student answers to be that long or detailed. As long as your student has given you a good answer that thoroughly answers the question, that's the answer you want to put on the board. Older students can answer the questions independently, and you can use your teacher manual answers to check them without having to read the material yourself. After completing the comprehension questions, it's time to begin memorizing the scripture verse for the week. Put the verse on the board so that you can talk about it. Talk about its meaning within the context of the story you've just read. Any difficult words, punctuation, and capitalization, anything that will help students to begin looking seriously at this scripture passage. We give you a couple of leading questions that you can either answer orally or have students jot answers to in their student guides. Then use the disappearing line technique to memorize. Recite the verse together several times. Then erase a few words at a time. Reciting together as the words on the board disappear. When the board is empty, you will have recited the verse so many times that the student has a nice start toward memorizing it. And the last thing you need to do is fill in the drill questions in the appendix of your study guide. They are marked by lesson, so you'll know which ones to fill in each week. These drill questions match the Old Testament and New Testament flashcards you'll use for review, and they represent the cumulative information we want students to retain from their study of the Bible. If your students have mastered the drill questions by the end of this course, they will have so much important information in their permanent memories about the characters, places, and events of the Bible, a nice starting point from which to advance to a study of early church history and apologetics. The activities in each lesson are generally finding relevant locations on a map or making observations based on the detailed illustrations in the Golden Children's Bible. These activities shouldn't take a lot of time. They can easily be incorporated into your discussion of each lesson. When students complete Christian Studies 1 through 3, they will have memorized 75 scripture passages and more than 300 drill questions, setting a foundation that will make a difference in their lives that no other subject can. Thank you for joining us for today's Teaching Guidelines. If you found it helpful, be sure to check out our Teaching Guidelines playlist that includes resources and tips for curriculum from Memoria Press. As always, subscribe to get more videos like these, comment below to let us know what you'd like to see in the future, and click the bell icon to know when we post new content to the channel. I'm Tanya Charlton. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.